Now this is probably the nicest thing I've ever built. For the shop, that is. Stick around to see what it is and why I built it today on Hinges Creek Woodshop. Design and aesthetic is something widely considered when building custom furniture, but not often used when creating something at the exact opposite end of the scale, shop furniture. So today I want to blur those lines and apply that concept to something most commonly used in the shop. Since I will be staining this project black, I wanted to select some boards with the best figuring, which in this case only really matters for the face parts as they will be the most visible. Also, when using a black stain, or ebonizing, it's best to choose a species that will allow the grain to pop through. In this case, to keep it cost effective, I chose red oak, but ash and white oak are also great options. I then broke everything up into more manageable pieces with a combination of my jigsaw and the bandsaw, while also making sure to stay proud of the line at least 1/8 of an inch. A build like this requires a lot of repetition and we're just getting started. There are a total of 7 layers that will make up this piece, 13 if you include the spacers. Before I can start shaping these pieces, I need to get the joint edges cut at the table saw. This will allow a common point for the templates to reference from. It will also establish a solid joint without any variations. The adjacent edge can then be trimmed, leaving the remaining 2 to be finished up on the router. But before I get too ahead of myself, I need to get each of the layers glued up. And contrary to popular belief, you can't use anything other than dominoes to line these pieces up. No dowel pins or biscuits, they just aren't going to work. Alright, I hope you know I'm kidding. As you'll see, I actually used 2 of the internet's most hated joinery methods at the same time. What the hell am I thinking? Who knows? Feel free to roast me with your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. And that's how the first glue up went. I think what I'm gonna do from now on out, so I don't have to use all these clamps, and you won't even see it because they'll be on the back side, I'm going to cut a pocket hole on the back side of each joint just to suck those 2 joints together with the dominoes. And I think that will hold just fine, just for the glue to set up. And then, like I said, as it's against the wall, those pocket holes won't be visible. So we'll see how it looks, but I think that'll help me clamp the 2 joints together, and that'll alleviate all the clamps that I had to use on this face piece. But 1 down, 6 more to go. Now while those set up, I follow the same processes as before, making the spacers that will go in between each layer. These are rather simple as they are just 4 straight edges, no routing needed. And now I can prep the templates by taping them fully together and then sticking them to one of the layers. This will only need to be done once, as the subsequent layers will be referenced from the first one, which is great because my template was ruined after the first run through anyway. Get yourself some carpet tape if your template tape isn't working out so well. I learned this tip from that one guy who turned his riding lawnmower into a tank. His name escapes me. Anyway, it's cheap and obviously very sticky. And now for the fun part. We can route the entire profile all at once with that first layer we made with the template. As you can see here, I'm having absolutely no trouble at all blazing through with this very dull bit. Really though, this one is over 3 years old and has never been sharpened. Whiteside makes some of the best bits out there, so it's about time to pick up a new one, even if it is $5 more than it was a few years ago at 45 bucks. Totally worth it in my opinion though. As you can see the piece starting to take shape, I can finalize each layer by cutting the ends at the miter saw. This will leave a much cleaner cut than if I were to flush trim the end grain and risk tear out. And now back to the spacers. I need to notch out 4 of them to accept some T-track. I'm referencing the top and bottom edges to make sure the tracks run parallel and level. With my blade at full height to give me the least radius in the cut, I run the long edge through the table saw, establishing a nice flat bottom. Here's the first time seeing all the layers stacked together, and man, it feels great to see an idea start to come to life. But this is also where I realized my first mistake. You'll notice in between each slat there's a spacer, and what I did, instead of making 4 of the spacers notched out for the T-track, I accidentally made all of them that way. So I'm not too happy with this look. What it was supposed to look like would be like a 3/8 setback down from each slat, but now they all have that notch out. I guess when you're rushing around trying to do things are bound to happen. So anyway, just thought I'd let you know that that's the one thing that I mixed up on this build so far. Trying not to dwell on the mishap, I wanted to test to make sure the T-track fits. Luckily, no problems here as it fits perfectly snug between the slats. Exactly what I had hoped for. You won't find a lot of brad nails in most fine furniture, but since this is a shop build, I feel these are perfectly fine, and they will help me line up each layer while keeping them from shifting. As this starts to come together, you may be saying to yourself, I feel like I've seen this piece before, and you'd be correct. The inspiration for this piece comes from the coffee table that Chris at 4 Eyes built a little while ago. The challenge for me is to make a version of that design, but for something that works in the shop setting. Something that always intrigued me about this slatted design is the fact that I felt the gaps in between could be used in some way or another while also hiding in plain sight. That made this choice the perfect candidate to use with T-track. It nestles perfectly in between the layers, thus hiding for the most part, but at the same time providing just enough adjustability for what I have planned. Also, always keep a deck of playing cards on hand. They helped center the T-track in between, keeping each track aligned with one another. Over to the wall, I needed to mark locations for all 4 mounting points, making sure they will hit a stud. That will help keep this 60-pound beast on the wall. And with it being so heavy, I knew I would need a little help, so I temporarily added a cleat for it to rest on while attaching it to the wall. I don't often see people use pocket holes in this way, but I have a shelf attached to the wall in the same manner that has held gallons of paint for many years. So I knew this would be perfectly fine for this application, considering I wanted to hide the fasteners as best as possible. I then got a little ahead of myself and removed the cleat, for which I would need to use for reinstallation when done with the finish. Speaking of which, I'm using Rubio Monocoat's black stain, which will need to fully dry overnight before applying the finishing oil. I do want to mention that there is another way to achieve this same look, and I have done that in the past. You can use India ink to dye your piece black and then use a polyurethane over top. I'm just barely tapping into the hard wax oils, so I thought I'd give this combination a try, which, on a shop project, it's the perfect time to try a new finish. Then it was time to get this back on the wall, and you can see I've already installed the cleat, making a world of difference. One final coat on the face of the project, and we are nearing the home stretch. Alright, so there you go. Wait a second. Hang on, we're not done. The first step in finishing this off is to reinstall the T-track I so meticulously laid out earlier. And maybe now is the perfect time to reveal the purpose of this project. I can almost guarantee you have never seen a drill charging station quite like this. So now, with all the bulk of the hard work done, I can get going on the various holders that will accompany this beautiful piece. I used some templates to get the shape just right, and then back over to the table saw to cut them to final height. Then a quick 1/8 inch roundover on all the parts just to break the edges. It's important to do this before the next step, as it will prevent me from getting to those areas of the part when everything is finally glued up. Again, fine furniture with brad nails sounds like a bit of a contradiction, but it absolutely works best in this situation. I used the drill press to get those long holes as straight as possible. And now to add finish to all the pieces. This is some leftover Rubio in the color Mud Light to give the white oak pieces a bit of character. Again, testing finishes on a shop project is key. Now we can assemble everything and watch it all come together. The T-tracks make quick work of setting up the individual holders while retaining flexibility to adjust for any setup. You'll also notice I'm using the knurled knob from my clamp rack video. I love this style as it's easy to grip but also very low profile. I have 3 of these chargers and I've only been using one of them over the last 5 years since I switched to Milwaukee. But I want to implement all 3 of these just to make sure that all my batteries are charged up and ready to go at any given moment. So now let's turn our attention to the charger rack that I'm going to install just below the drill holder. This should be relatively easy. This is just kind of finishing it off. Basically a plank that will hold the chargers and keep everything nice and tidy. Starting off, I line everything up and take some measurements to make sure all the chargers will fit within the board. Mapping the screw locations out is crucial to make sure each of the chargers fit without any discrepancies. I then add this last piece as a bit of a fail-safe, just to make sure the chargers don't slip off the screws when I'm removing a battery. And now that everything looks perfectly situated, I can throw together a quick base that will serve 2 purposes. One is to angle the chargers 45 degrees off the wall, making the batteries easier to get on and off. And 2, it will hide all the cords, making everything nice and tidy. Lastly, a quick finish to make sure it matches the rest of the setup, and I am happy to call this one done. Now that's more like it. A drill charging station with all the bells and whistles and plenty of flexibility. Everything is adjustable and can be adapted to fit a variety of tools in the future. Also, I'm glad I was able to fit my 3 chargers just below. That way I can make sure I have all my batteries nice and topped up and ready to go at any given moment. But I want to hear from you. What do you think about making something this nice for the shop? I know it's a bit overkill, but I'm happy to have a functional piece of art in this space. But that brings this one to a close. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.